Hey patrons, thanks for joining me today. I have just kind of a quick video here to show everybody on how I paint, quote unquote, paint my paintings for the Realm Ethereal monthly creations that have been coming out probably ever since early 2018. So I've been doing these paintings for my property, intellectual property, the Realm Ethereal, for over 2 years now, I think, or coming up on 2 years. And when I first started painting, I was using Procreate, and I still use that, but I was doing everything in Procreate. I was doing the drawing, the sketching, and the coloring, and ultimately, the painting. The last 4 paintings, I think, or 3, I think, ever since Calestus, which I think is going back 4 paintings, I started using a different method, one that I saw online, and one that one of the creators that I follow, Peter Moorbacher, uses, which is basically working in Photoshop. So I take the image out of Procreate, I finish up what I need to do in there, and then I do my painting here in Photoshop. So I'm going to show you exactly what it is that I do. So in a nutshell, I have the painting in grayscale. To add color, I'm just going to give you a quick example here. What I usually do with this method is I paint with gradient maps in Photoshop. So I'm going to take a gradient map, I'm going to click it, and you'll notice as soon as I do, I get this little shift in color. The painting goes from grayscale to still monochromatic, but now it's got this yellow tint to it. Now that yellow is just by default like the last color I had when I was working on a piece. So to even show you just a little more, this properties panel will open up and you'll see this gradient here. I'm going to click on that gradient. This window comes up here, the gradient editor, and it's set foreground to background. So what that means is I can change any color here. I'm going to take the yellow, click on this little color box, and as you can see, it's showing yellow right now. So I'm going to click, let's say, on this violet color. Notice how it changes. If I bring the value down here, it gets very neutral, but let's just say for argument's sake here, I'm going to make this just a little more saturated, just like that. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to look at this box here, which is my lightest values. I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to give it another color here. Maybe something more orangish yellow, just to give a complement to it. Now notice how it just right away, it just shifts the whole look of the painting. Now if I wanted to, I can introduce a third value. But let me click on that. I can introduce a third middle tone, a half tone, and shift that maybe toward blue, maybe even purple, maybe red. That's kind of cool looking. Not what I'd want to do, but it kind of illustrates the point. So as you can see, I've taken my grayscale painting, and with 3 simple shifts in the shadows, highlights, and the midtones, I've already got a piece that has plenty of color to work with. And if I want, I can just adjust it like so. Okay, now that's one phase. That is one phase of the process painting using this gradient method. So here's what I do. I don't want my entire painting to look like that, but like let's say I wanted the birds to look like that, the falcons. I'm going to click back on here. I'm going to hit Command I. I'm on a Mac. I think on a Windows it would be Control I. But we're going to go Command Invert. So it goes back to black, or grayscale. So the next thing I do is I'm going to grab a brush. I'm going to paint here. I'm just going to use this soft brown brush. And what we actually end up doing, if you notice right here, I can pick either black or white. I'm going to switch this real quick. I'm going to hit DX on the keyboard. That'll toggle it between, if you look here, that'll toggle it between black and white. So whenever I want to add color, I make sure that the box is toggled, the color is toggled to white, which it is. And I then take my paintbrush, again, which is just a soft airbrush. And as long as this is selected right here, this little black box here, the gradient map 2, if I start painting, again, I've got 30% opacity, so I'm just going to slide that up here to maybe 62. Flow at 43 is good. I'm just going to start painting right here. Look at this. So what you would do is you just go through. Let me increase the brush size. That way it just gives you a quick down and dirty illustration of what I'm doing. So I'm not really painting, but in a sense I'm kind of opening up and filling in with the paintbrush. Again, set to white right here. You got to make sure it's set to white. And then just start painting or opening up with the brush the areas where you want that color range to appear. So in this case, we're going to have like the falcon. Okay, cool. So that falcon is now a pretty cool mix of like magenta with some yellow, whitish highlights. Now my brush again is set to a certain opacity. It's only set to 62. So that means that I'm not getting the full saturation of the colors here. So as I continue to paint, go over the spots, I can bring the saturation up. Just like that. So now let's say I wanted to paint in the flesh tones for Evelina herself. Here's what we do. Click on this little icon here, open up another gradient map, and you're going to notice it goes back to that same color by default. This time I'm going to change her flesh tones. I'm going to see if I can get something a little more natural looking. So again, this is the shadow area here, the darkest darks for her skin tones. So let's just say we go with something like that. I might have to fix that later. We're going to go into the mid-tone range, pick something warm, and then we're going to kind of pick the lightest lights. I might have to adjust this one as well. So I'm just going to throw down some colors here. See what she looks like. Okay, there we go. Maybe a little more pink. Then go back to the hat. Whoops. If you're not careful, you might add an extra color in here just by doing that. It's that simple. So click on the mid-tone. I want to make this a little more red. Actually, let's go up to this red. And my original piece had quite a bit of red in it. It's because the sky was red, so there was just a ton of red. Here, I'm trying to determine what's the best color for that mid-tone. So the drawback, of course, is that it can be tricky trying to figure out which colors to plug in there. But I like it because it really opens up the possibility of making really quick changes to color right on the fly. And for me, that is such an advantage. That looked nice right there. Such an advantage time-wise, because I can tell you right now that I spent over, I think it was right 24 hours painting the grayscale version. That's only in grayscale, absolutely no color whatsoever. This is starting to look more normal for me, for my taste at least. But 24 hours, it's a good chunk of time to just work in grayscale. But the advantage of working in grayscale is that I don't have to worry about color. I can just focus on value. And value is so critical to taking a painting to color. So by working in grayscale, spending a buttload of time on that, I can really focus on just making sure I nail those values, and that once the values are correct, then I can really just play around with all these colors here, adding them in any way I see fit to whatever my tastes are. So that's kind of the process. Overall, this is, you get the idea here pretty much, I think. I'm just going to see if I can tweak this little color here one more time. Add a little red, that looks ugly. And move it down. Again, you have to kind of know how your values work. You can't just assume that you can throw any color in there. Well, actually, let me back up. You really could throw any color in there. But again, it has to do more with the values you pick. If the values are correct, it doesn't really matter what the colors are. They can be anything. As long as the values are okay, they'll make it easier to discern what it is you're doing. So anyway, not the best range of tones for her, but I'm going to move on to the example just to show you. So again, I'm going to click back here on this gradient map 3. Make sure I'm on that white box. You don't want to be here. You want to be there. Hit Command I. Guess what? We switched back to our brush, and I just start painting wherever I want her flesh tone to appear. So in this case, I'll start painting parts of her neck. And you know what, just for fun, I'm going to move the opacity up to 100. That'll make this really clear. So I'm just going to really paint in this area here. Her face, her neck. Move into the arm, bicep, a little bit of the forearm right before that that little wrist thing, or forearm bracket or shackles she's wearing, like a brace. So you get the picture here. So we just go through and just open this all up. Paint, paint, paint. So it's not, again, it's not painting per se, because I'm really applying a gradient map to the values that I painted on my iPad. I mean, you could have done this on your iPad too. You could have you could have done the grayscale in Photoshop. The reason why I like using the iPad is because it's so lightweight. Like literally, physically speaking, it's such a lightweight device. As well, the program is lightweight, and I really want the process of drawing or painting in grayscale to be as lightweight as possible, almost like I'm working on paper. And lightweight meaning that there's not like a whole lot of choices with layers, not a whole lot of choices with tools, even though I have that, but it just seems a lot more natural to me to work on my iPad Pro, to do the composition, to do the drawing, to do the grayscale painting, and then when I'm ready to paint and add color, I take advantage of my iMac and then moving the painting over to Photoshop and then working, so on and so forth. As we are here right now, we're basically working on the figure. So if you you can see where this is going, you would just do this throughout the whole painting, and it seems like it's tedious, but really it goes by pretty fast. I think I wrote down somewhere, but I think I did about 4.5 to 5 hours of color painting to derive the final piece that you've all seen online, or if you're a patron, you've seen it early, you know, the final finished painting and whatnot. But that was 5 hours of coloring, which allowed me to really tweak colors and really focus on playing with the colors, not so much trying to paint and do it. So it's not wrong or right. It's just I think it's really efficient for what I want to do here, and it makes it easier for me to actually get these paintings out faster. I think maybe not faster, but I feel that I have more flexibility when it comes to adjusting the colors and the tones. What happens if I switch? Check this out. If I switch this to black, if I switch this to black and I use the brush, what it's going to do is it's actually going to remove color. Isn't that cool? It's that easy. So I'm going to undo that, switch back to white. Now here is another aspect if I wanted to blend colors. So let's say the sky actually was going to be blue and I wanted more blue in my character. So I'm going to go to another gradient map, click on the gradient here, I'm going to switch this color. This is against my darkest darks. I'm going to move it over to a bluish hue, and I think I'm just going to work with two values and with the gradient stepping in between them, of course. So then moving on to, like, let's say this really light blue color here. Let's work with that. Okay, so I'm going to keep that. Go on to this gradient map, which is right here. Click on the box, hit Command I. So now I want to paint in some bluish hues to the body here. And in fact, we can also add it to the falcon. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to switch our opacity to the brush really light, maybe like 25%. And then I'm going to start painting right over this. I don't know if you can see that. Let me zoom in here. And we're starting to open up some blues in here. Starting to paint this in. I don't have to worry about the values because I've already spent a buttload of time. Again, 24 hours total painting time according to Procreate. And now I'm just kind of having fun with the colors here. Adding in these bluish, kind of like dramatic type colors in here. Now this is purely arbitrary what I'm doing now, but I mean, it shows you what you can do with this. And let's say I needed to reflect some of that color in the birds here, like falcons. Maybe I want to take that blue into the shadow areas. So I'm going to open up paint where the value, where I see it's darkest, or at least kind of in that 80 or 75% range, just start adding some blues on there, painting it in. The more I go over it, because the opacity on the brush is set to only 23, the more I can gradually blend in colors there. So as you can see, this is, I think, a pretty cool way to start getting colors added. And again, really the biggest benefit in my mind is just not having to focus or worry about value. And I mean, if I was doing this all with straight colors, you know, right off the palette and using it with the brush going straight to color, which, you know, a lot of people do, nothing wrong with it. But if I were to do that and I decided I wanted to change a color, I'd have to totally like repaint areas, and also have to kind of recalibrate in my mind color, but or also value, because that can tend to get muddied up when you're trying to do both at the same time. So, at least in my experience. So this gives you an idea of what's possible. So, and here's one more thing. If I were to go back to the grayscale drawing, so I'm going to turn these layers off, these gradient maps, it's still intact. And if I wanted to experiment with giving her a different color, I could totally do that. So, what I was going to show you was that when I'm in this grayscale layer, if I, let's say, wanted to make, like, let's say her knee, for whatever reason I wanted more contrast in the knee, I can take one of my tools, like the, where did that go? The burn tool. Where is that? Right here. Go to the burn tool, and I want to burn the shadows. I'm going to keep the exposure light, but I'm going to show you what happens. So I can totally, if I needed to increase the value here, like dramatically, I can go to the grayscale drawing and then turn on her skin tones, and it's there. Like I can make adjustments here into my grayscale version without having to think about like the color that I just applied. So, and you can work back and forth this way with colors as you see fit. Now when all the color is laid in here, I'm going to turn these off because those are just the examples. I'm going to turn on the full painting now. So the painting that everyone has seen at this point. Let's see. Here's a base color. Here's Evelina's flesh tone. Here are some rock colors in the foreground behind her. Something I call the ethereal blue to add just a little bit of cool color because there's a lot of red, and you notice the blue kind of pulls in behind her, so I want to keep the focus there. And then I had something called gradient map on. I'm not sure what that was. That may be doing nothing. Extra layer. Then I have a blue pass. It's pretty subtle, but if you look at the falcons, especially the one on her right, you really start to see some blue creeping in there. Very subtle. And then a red pass. This is over her body. Red pass, adding some of that transition color between the light and the dark areas, which is kind of like a little bit more saturated. Then I have a blue-black color, adding a little bit of depth in the shadows in this area here. So as I turn that on. And then finally I have something here for the falcons, which isn't doing anything. Again, probably an extra layer. Then I have this layer here called opaque. And I do employ some opaque painting techniques after the fact. And you can see if you were to zoom in right here, zoom in on Evelina. If we look at opaque as I click it on, you'll see that's a lot of these highlights throughout the armor, the gold armor on her torso and on her wrist, and also, you know, over here as well. So my opaques, I do, especially with highlights, I'll make those on a separate layer. There's a little bit of highlight even being applied to her nose right here. So if I click this on, see that? And then a couple of other miscellaneous layers here, some stars, and then finally my signature. So that's it. That's how I paint in Photoshop with colors.